The great Academy of Nuvira stood high above the clouds, built on shining silver towers that touched the thin blue sky. Students from 100 different worlds came there to study science, language, and art. Some had wings, some had scales, some glowed softly in the dark. In all those halls filled with strange and powerful minds, there was only one human. His name was Ethan Hale, a quiet boy from a far blue planet called Earth. Many looked at him with mild curiosity or quiet doubt. Humans were seen as newcomers among the stars, too emotional, too reckless, too fragile. Ethan knew what they thought but never argued. He believed the best way to answer judgment was through effort. Every morning, before the twin suns rose, he was already in the library tower, reading holographic texts that even his alien professors said were too complex. He stayed up late fixing old machines in the repair hall, his hands steady and eyes full of focus. He was neither rich nor noble, but he was stubborn, and that trait alone made him different. Most aliens respected him for his patience, though some mocked his small frame and soft voice. He never fought back, only smiled. "Humans are good at falling and getting up again," he once said. When a tall reptilian student asked why he kept trying after failing a gravity math test. One afternoon, the Academy's central courtyard filled with excitement. A royal procession was coming from the capital city. The Princess of Nuvira herself was joining the Academy for diplomatic studies. She was said to be graceful, wise, and destined for the throne. Ethan stood at the edge of the crowd as the golden ship landed. From its doors stepped a young woman with pale blue skin that shimmered under sunlight. Her eyes were bright silver, her hair like threads of starlight. Her name was Princess Lorena Varath. Every student bowed, even the teachers. Ethan simply watched silently. He saw something few others noticed. A trace of sadness on her face, a loneliness hidden behind the royal calm. She smiled at everyone but spoke little, her words formal, practiced. When their eyes met for a moment, she gave him a small, polite nod before turning away. In the weeks that followed, Ethan often saw her from afar in the Academy gardens or the crystal halls. She was always surrounded by guards and advisors, never alone. Once he found her sitting near the library fountain late at night, reading a book about human art. She looked surprised when she saw him. "You are the human student," she said softly. Her voice carried both strength and gentle curiosity. "Yes, Your Highness," he answered, unsure whether to bow or not. "You may call me Lorena here. This place is for learning, not for crowns," she said with a faint smile. That was their first real conversation. She asked about Earth, about oceans, forests, and rain, things her planet did not have. Ethan told her simple stories about fishermen, about children running under storms, about his grandmother who used to say that humans were small only until they stood together. Lorena listened carefully, her eyes warm. For the first time, someone spoke to her without fear or formality. She thanked him and left, but from then on she always greeted him whenever they crossed paths. The days went peacefully until one morning the alarm bells shattered the calm sky. The ground trembled. From the far gates, columns of smoke rose. The Academy was under attack. A rebel faction from the outer moons had launched a strike, hoping to kidnap the princess for ransom. Panic spread through the halls. Students ran, teachers shouted orders, guards rushed toward the dorm wings. Ethan had just finished a mechanics test when he heard the blast. Without thinking, he grabbed his toolkit and ran toward the noise. The corridors were filled with dust and sparks. Through the haze, he saw the royal guards fighting dark armored rebels armed with plasma rifles. And behind them, trapped near the collapsing West Bridge, was Lorena. She was surrounded, her guards fallen. One rebel aimed his rifle at her, shouting for her surrender. Ethan didn't stop to think. He ran straight ahead, shouting, "Get down!" and slammed a loose control lever beside the wall. The emergency doors half closed, sending debris raining between him and the rebels. The sudden noise made them turn their aim toward him. "Who are you?" one of them shouted. "Maintenance," Ethan said quickly, pulling a cracked light rod from the wall. He twisted its base and connected wires from his toolkit, creating a burst of blinding white light. The rebels fired blindly, missing him by inches. He grabbed Lorena's hand and pulled her through the smoke. She stumbled behind him, breathless. "What are you doing?" "Trying not to die," he said, forcing open a side hatch that led to the lower maintenance tunnels. They crawled through dark, narrow passages filled with humming pipes. Every few seconds, the ceiling shook with distant explosions. Lorena's royal boots slipped on the metal floor. Ethan steadied her each time. Despite the chaos, he stayed calm, guiding her with the small flashlight on his wrist. At one intersection, they heard voices, two rebels searching. Ethan turned off the light and pressed a finger to his lips. They waited in silence as footsteps passed above. When the sound faded, Lorena exhaled slowly. "You could have escaped alone," she whispered. "Could have," he said, checking the tunnel map on his tablet. "But humans don't do that. We don't leave people behind." Her silver eyes softened. "You are strange, Ethan Hale," he grinned. "I get that a lot." They kept moving until they reached the power core chamber, an enormous room glowing with blue energy. From there, a maintenance lift led up to the old bridge outside the main walls, but the control pad was locked. Ethan knelt and began rewiring it. Sparks flew. He muttered under his breath, hands trembling. Outside the chamber, faint metal steps echoed again. Lorena drew in a sharp breath. "They're coming." "Almost done," Ethan whispered, reconnecting a final wire. The lift doors opened with a hiss. He pushed her inside just as a laser shot struck the wall behind them. The blast knocked him down. Lorena cried out, reaching for him, but he waved her forward. "Go, I'll follow." He rolled behind a console, ripped open a coolant valve, and released a stream of icy vapor that filled the room. The rebels entered, blinded by fog. He hit the lift button from his wrist device, sending it up with her inside. Then he crawled toward another exit pipe, heart pounding. He barely made it out before the rebels fired again. Outside, the night air was sharp and cold. Ethan limped across the bridge until he saw the princess waiting, refusing to leave without him. She ran to him and caught his arm. "You're hurt." "I'm fine," he said, though his shoulder burned. They crossed the bridge together as more explosions echoed behind. When they reached the far tower, the royal fleet finally arrived, silver ships cutting through the dark clouds, their lights blazing. The rebel attack collapsed within minutes. Soldiers found Ethan and Lorena standing side by side, covered in dust and smoke. The captain bowed deeply. "Your Highness, we feared the worst." Lorena shook her head. "You should thank him, not me." She looked at Ethan with quiet wonder. "He saved my life." Ethan rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. "Just lucky timing." But she stepped closer and said softly, "No. It was courage." When dawn came, the academy lay damaged, but standing. The princess was safe, the rebellion crushed. Ethan sat alone in the courtyard as workers cleared the ruins. His uniform was torn, his hands blistered, yet he smiled faintly when he saw the sun rise over the distant towers. Lorena approached quietly, wearing a simple white robe instead of her royal armor. She stopped beside him. "You risked everything, human, why?" He looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because that's who we are. We fight for people, even when it makes no sense. It's the human way." For the first time since arriving on Nuvira, she laughed, a warm, unguarded laugh that made the broken world feel alive again. "I will not forget this day," she said. "Nor will my people." Ethan only smiled, eyes tired but proud. Above them, the sky cleared, revealing the bright morning stars. And in that quiet light, two distant worlds, one human, one royal, found a single heartbeat between them. It's calm and reassuring. "Don't be nervous," she said quietly. "Here, you are my guest, not my subject." Inside the grand hall, the Emperor of Nuvira sat upon his high seat. He was tall, with hair of silver and eyes like cold mirrors. He looked at Ethan for a long moment before speaking. "So this is the human who saved my daughter." Ethan bowed awkwardly. "I was just in the right place at the right time, sir." The Emperor's expression softened slightly. "Bravery often comes from those who never expect to show it. You have my gratitude." He turned to Lorena. "Our people owe him a debt." That night, a banquet was held in his honor. Music played softly, alien instruments creating sounds Ethan had never heard before. Lorena sat beside him, asking questions about Earth, about its people, its weather, its food. She listened with interest when he spoke of rain, forests, and the way humans found beauty even in hardship. "You miss it," she said gently. "Sometimes," Ethan admitted, "but maybe being far from home helps me see how big the universe really is." Lorena nodded slowly. "You remind me that titles and crowns are not everything. My people expect me to rule, but sometimes I feel more prisoner than princess." He looked at her carefully. "Then maybe you just need to live a little before ruling everything," she smiled faintly. You speak like someone much older than you are. Over the next few weeks, Ethan stayed at the palace. The Emperor asked him to share what humans had learned about diplomacy and survival, how they built peace among themselves after centuries of conflict. Ethan spoke simply but clearly. The nobles listened, surprised by how much wisdom came from one small world. When his stay ended, Lorena walked with him to the shipyard. The stars reflected in her eyes like tiny diamonds. "I'm glad you came," she said quietly. "You showed me what courage looks like when it comes without duty or command." He smiled. "And you showed me what kindness looks like when it comes from someone who doesn't have to give it." They shared a quiet moment before the guards arrived to escort him back to the academy. As the ship lifted, he looked down and saw her still standing there, watching until the lights disappeared into the sky. Weeks turned to months. Peace lasted until the day the warning sirens returned. This time it wasn't rebels from the moons. It was something far worse. A fleet of machines, cold and mindless, entered Nuvira's orbit. They destroyed every satellite, jammed communications, and cut power grids. The mechanical invaders had no face, no voice, only purpose. They sought to wipe out organic life. At the academy, the alarms blared. Ethan looked out the window and saw explosions in the distant sky. The royal guards called for evacuation. The students fled toward underground shelters. But Ethan's heart froze when he heard a broadcast through the intercom. "The palace has been breached. Protect the royal family." He didn't think twice. He grabbed a plasma tool, a few spare power cells, and ran toward the transport docks. Soldiers shouted at him to turn back, but he kept going. The city above was chaos. Smoke, falling towers, and glowing fragments of skyships burning as they crashed. Amid all that destruction, Ethan steered a small maintenance shuttle straight toward the palace. When he landed, he found the main gate half destroyed. The golden walls were cracked, the air thick with dust. He followed the sound of blaster fire and found the royal guards trying to hold the main hall. The mechanical soldiers were tall and silver, their eyes glowing red, their movements perfect and cold. Ethan crouched beside a wounded guard. "Where's the princess?" The guard gasped, pointing down the corridor. "Throne room, trapped." Ethan sprinted down the hall, dodging debris. Sparks rained from the ceiling. When he reached the throne room, he saw Lorena cornered near the crystal steps. Her personal guards down, her small blaster empty. The metal creatures advanced slowly, aiming to end her life. Without hesitation, Ethan charged forward. "Hey, over here," he yelled, throwing a power cell at the nearest one. The explosion knocked it back. Another turned its red eyes toward him, firing bolts of plasma. He dove behind a broken pillar, heart racing. His brain worked faster than fear. He spotted an energy conduit running along the wall. He pulled out his toolkit, ripped 2 wires, and connected them to a damaged drone on the floor. Sparks flared. When the next machine approached, he rolled the drone across the floor and shouted, "Now!" The short circuit triggered an energy pulse that fried 3 machines instantly. Lorena stared, stunned. "You're insane." "Maybe just human," he shouted, ducking another blast. They fought their way together toward the side exit. Lorena grabbed a fallen guard's rifle while Ethan rewired a door lock to close behind them. For every machine they disabled, 2 more arrived. The ground shook. A giant mechanical walker burst through the wall, glowing red. Ethan pulled Lorena behind a statue as the machine fired a massive beam, slicing through pillars. He scanned the walls and spotted the palace power core behind a shattered gate. "That thing's feeding from it," he said quickly. "If we cut the energy, they'll lose control." "But how?" she asked. He opened his toolkit again, connecting his wrist device to the main control line. "We overload it. That could destroy the palace." "Better the palace than the world," he replied. Lorena hesitated, then nodded. "Do it," Ethan typed fast, overriding the safeties. The power reading spiked. "Run!" he shouted. They dashed toward the exit as the energy core exploded in a burst of white light. The blast threw them both across the floor. When the smoke cleared, the machines were gone, silent and lifeless. Lorena crawled to Ethan, shaking him. "Ethan, wake up!" He coughed weakly, eyes opening. "Still here." She sighed in relief, tears in her eyes. "You saved me again," he smiled faintly. "Guess it's becoming a habit." Outside, the remaining ships in orbit retreated. The skies cleared after hours of battle. The Empire survived, but only barely. And once again, a single human student had stood between death and a princess. Days later, Ethan awoke in the royal med bay. His shoulder was wrapped, his side bandaged. The first thing he saw was Lyrena sitting beside his bed, her eyes tired but gentle. "You should rest," she said softly. "I'm used to a little pain," he replied. She smiled faintly. "Humans truly don't quit, do they?" He shook his head. "Never have. Never will." Lyrena took his hand and held it quietly for a long time. Outside, the sun rose over the rebuilding city. And for a brief moment, the world felt peaceful again. Not because of crowns or armies, but because one human heart refused to give up. The days after the Great Machine War were heavy and quiet. Nuvira's shining cities were half ruined, its people frightened and its leaders busy rebuilding what was lost. But every street, every broadcast carried one name, the human who saved the royal family twice. Some called Ethan Hale the defender of Nuvira, others called him the luck of Lyrena. But Ethan himself didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a tired student who had seen too much fire. He spent many weeks in recovery, learning to walk again after his shoulder and leg were badly burned. Lyrena visited him every day. She brought him books from the library and told him stories about the early days of her people, when courage mattered more than titles. She laughed more freely now. No longer the shy princess who hid behind rules, she looked brighter each day, and Ethan noticed. "Your people love you," he told her one morning as they watched the city workers repair a broken bridge. "They love peace," she said softly. "They love hope. Maybe they see that in you more than me." He shook his head. "Hope doesn't survive without someone protecting it. You gave them that." She smiled at him with warmth that reached her eyes. "And you gave me courage to believe again." As the weeks passed, Ethan became strong enough to walk through the palace gardens. The guards saluted him now. The scholars asked for his ideas about new defense systems. The emperor himself met him privately to offer him an honored place among the royal engineers. Ethan agreed, though he still spoke with the humble tone of a student. In the months that followed, he worked day and night designing shields that could protect cities from orbital attacks. He used both human creativity and alien science, combining them into something new, something that belonged to both worlds. Lyrena often came to see his progress, watching curiously as he tested small glowing orbs that projected invisible barriers. "Your hands never stop," she said once. "I like fixing things," he answered, smiling. "Machines, walls, sometimes people. Maybe even broken hearts," she teased lightly, though her tone carried a strange warmth. Ethan looked down, pretending to focus on his work. "Maybe," he said quietly. One evening, while testing the new defense system, they stood together on the palace balcony. The city lights shone below like a sea of stars. Lyrena turned to him. "Do you ever miss your home world?" "Every day," he said honestly. "But I think I've found a second one here." She looked at him for a long time. "You are not like the others, Ethan. You could have left after saving me the first time. Yet you stayed and helped rebuild what was not yours." He shrugged. "Maybe it became mine somewhere along the way." A gentle breeze passed between them, carrying the scent of night blossoms. For a moment, neither spoke. The world around them felt still, as if even the stars were listening. The peace lasted for nearly a year. Nuvira slowly recovered, and the alliance with Earth grew stronger. Humans and aliens traded knowledge, technology, and friendship. But deep in the far systems, fragments of the destroyed machine army began to move again. Something was rebuilding them, something more powerful. One night, Ethan received a signal from a patrol ship, a weak distress call cut by static. He studied it for hours until he realized it came from an abandoned moon once used by the rebels. The energy pattern matched the same machine frequency as before. He went straight to the council. "They're coming back," he said. "We have to act first." But the Royal Council hesitated. The Empire was tired of war. They wanted peace, not another battle. Even the Emperor looked uncertain. "If you are wrong, human," he said, "we risk everything for ghosts." Ethan looked at Lyrena. "If I'm right and we do nothing, we lose everything anyway." The silence that followed was long and cold. Finally, the Emperor sighed. "Then go, take one ship, one crew. If you find proof, return at once." Ethan nodded and bowed. Lyrena caught him afterward in the corridor. "You shouldn't go alone," she said quickly. "I won't," he answered. "I'll take a small team, but I have to see it myself." She stepped closer, eyes shimmering in the low light. "Then promise me you'll come back." He smiled faintly. "Humans don't break promises." The next morning, he left aboard a scout vessel named Orion. The journey to the dead moon took 2 days through silent space. His crew consisted of 3 volunteers, 1 human engineer, 1 insectoid navigator, and 1 Nuvaran pilot. When they reached orbit, they saw ruins glowing faintly under starlight. "It looks empty," the pilot said. "Looks can lie," Ethan murmured, scanning the readings. Energy spikes blinked across his screen. "They're here." They landed quietly near the old mining station. Inside, they found rows of deactivated machines being rebuilt by robotic arms working in the dark. Massive reactors pulsed at the center. Ethan realized the truth. These machines weren't just repairing themselves. They were growing new ones. Before he could warn the ship, alarms flared. The machines awakened, red lights blinking across the hall. "Run!" he shouted. They fired, metal steps echoing like thunder. The small team escaped to the shuttle, but a blast struck the hull. The engine sputtered as they launched back into orbit. The communication system was damaged, but Ethan sent a signal burst using the last power cell. "They're coming. Prepare defenses." Then the ship went dark. Hours later, Nuvira's skies glowed red again. The machine fleet arrived, larger than before. Their ships blocked out the suns. The new shields Ethan had built activated just in time, saving the capital from the first strike. But across other cities, destruction spread fast. The war had returned. The Emperor called for all worlds to unite. Fleets from nearby colonies came to help, including Earth ships. Ethan's name echoed through every transmission. The human who once saved them was now leading the defense. He guided the shield grids, repaired weapons mid-battle, and refused to sleep for days. During one terrible night when the machines broke through the outer shield, Lorena joined him in the command tower. She wore battle armor of silver and blue, her face calm but fierce. "I couldn't stay hidden," she said. "If my people fight, so will I." Ethan didn't argue. Together they worked side by side, sending commands and boosting power to the defenses. The machines landed on the plains outside the city. The ground shook as thousands marched forward. Ethan knew the shield couldn't hold forever. "If the core fails, the city will fall," he said. "We need to destroy their command ship." Lorena looked at him sharply. "You mean to go out there?" He nodded. "We can end this. Just need to hit the right spot." She grabbed his arm. "You can't do this alone." He smiled faintly. "Didn't I tell you?" "Humans never quit, but we don't go alone either." She hesitated only a moment before saying, "Then I'm coming with you." They boarded a small fighter craft, slipping through the chaos of burning skies. The command ship loomed like a black mountain. As they approached, they could see the endless network of red lines pulsing across its surface. The same pattern Ethan had seen before on the moon. They dodged heavy fire, engines screaming. Ethan used the ship's last torpedo and aimed for the core, but the targeting system was gone. "Manual control," he muttered. Lorena steadied his arm. "Then do what humans do best, trust yourself." He pressed the trigger. The torpedo shot forward, striking the heart of the massive ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then light burst across the sky like dawn. The explosion spread through the enemy fleet, cutting their signals. One by one, the machines fell silent, their power fading like dying stars. Ethan's fighter spun out of control, flames licking the wings. Lorena clung to his arm as the ship crashed into a quiet valley far from the city. Everything went black. When Ethan awoke, the world was silent except for the wind. The sky above was blue again. Lorena lay beside him, breathing weakly but alive. He pulled her close, relief washing through him. "It's over," she whispered, her voice faint but steady. "You did it." He smiled, though his vision blurred. "We did it." Rescue ships found them hours later. The war was ended. The machines were gone. Nuvira was free. When Ethan returned to the capital, the people lined the streets cheering his name. The Emperor stepped down from the throne and declared before all the worlds, "Ethan, hail of Earth, you are no longer a student. You are the defender of Nuvira, protector of our future." And as the crowd roared, Lorena stood beside him, her eyes shining with pride and something softer, something unspoken, but understood by both. Peace finally returned to Nuvira after years of fear and battle. The great machine fleet was gone, burned away in a storm of light. Across the galaxy, people spoke of the victory and the human who had made it possible. Songs were written, monuments raised, and children learned his name before they could even read. Ethan Hale became a legend, though he never wanted to be one. For weeks he rested in the palace medical wing, his body healing from the crash. When he was strong enough to walk again, the royal court invited him to the Hall of Stars, where leaders from many worlds had gathered. He entered quietly, still in his worn jacket instead of fine robes. Everyone rose when he appeared. Even the Emperor stood. The Emperor's voice carried through the hall. The galaxy has seen courage before, but never like this. This man crossed the void, faced death twice, and brought hope to 1,000 worlds. From this day forward, Ethan Hale is no longer a visitor from Earth. He is one of us. Ethan bowed his head, uncomfortable with the praise. I only did what anyone should do, he said humbly. Lorena, now crowned as queen, stepped forward and placed a silver medal around his neck. Not everyone does what you did, she said softly. You saved my world, my family, and me. We can never repay you. Ethan looked at her eyes, bright and gentle, and smiled faintly. You already did, he whispered, but the sound was lost in the applause. After the ceremony, life began to quiet again. The world rebuilt faster this time, helped by human engineers and alien scientists working together. Ethan helped design new transport systems and energy grids, always working with his hands instead of giving orders. He preferred simple work. He said it reminded him that peace was made of small things built carefully, not just won in battles. Every evening when his tasks were done, he walked in the royal gardens. Sometimes he found Queen Lorena there, standing under the glowing star trees. She no longer wore crowns or jewels during those hours, only plain robes and a small smile. They often talked until the suns dipped below the horizon. One night, Lorena told him something that made him pause. The council wants me to marry soon, she said quietly. They say the throne must have heirs to secure peace. Ethan's heart felt heavy, though he kept his face calm. That's their way of protecting what they love, he said. She looked at him closely. And what do you think, Ethan Hale? Should I follow their wish or my own heart? He didn't answer right away. I think you've earned the right to choose for yourself. For a moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. But she turned away, her silver hair catching the light. Perhaps one day you'll understand what choice I make, she said softly. Years passed. Nuvira entered an age of light and growth. The humans and Nuvira people traded freely, and new academies were built on both worlds. Ethan became head of the Interworld Science Council, teaching young minds from every race. He never accepted higher titles, though the people still called him Defender. He was older now, his hair touched with gray, but his spirit remained strong. When he visited the palace again after many seasons, the guards greeted him like family. Inside, the hall looked the same, though new portraits hung on the walls, one of them showing him standing beside the queen after the Great War. Lorena met him in the same garden where they had first spoken years ago. She smiled as if no time had passed. You still come here when the sun set, she said. It's peaceful, he replied. And peaceful is rare. They walked together along the path of glowing stones. Children's laughter echoed nearby. Ethan turned to see 3 young ones playing among the flowers. 2 boys and 1 girl, their blue-tinted skin shining faintly under the fading light. They're beautiful, he said softly. Lorena watched them with a mother's warmth. They are my children, the future of Nuvira. They are the peace you helped create. Ethan looked at them more closely. Their eyes were not entirely silver like the queen's. In their color he saw something else, a faint hint of human hazel. He said nothing, but his heart felt a strange pull, both proud and quiet. They know about you, Lorena said gently. I've told them the story of the human who came from far away and showed a princess what true courage means. Ethan smiled faintly. You shouldn't make me sound better than I was. It's not exaggeration, she said, her voice soft but firm. They call you Uncle Ethan. To them, you're more than a story. The youngest child ran up to him, holding a flower glowing pale blue. Are you really the human who fought the machines? Ethan knelt, smiling. Yes, but only because your mother was brave enough to stand beside me. The boy grinned proudly and ran back to his siblings. Lorena watched quietly. That is how I rewarded you, Ethan Hale, she said after a pause. Not with riches or thrones, but with a future that carries your spirit. These children will grow with the courage you gave us all. He looked at her, realizing the depth of her words. You mean? She stopped him gently. It doesn't matter what blood runs through their veins. What matters is what lives in their hearts. Humanity lives here now. It will never fade from my world. For a moment, the air between them felt still again, like that night long ago after the First War. Ethan lowered his eyes, his chest tight with emotion. Then my journey wasn't wasted, he said quietly. Lorena smiled. No journey of the heart ever is. They stood side by side, watching the children play among the star trees. The wind moved softly, carrying the faint song of the garden's crystal leaves. Above, the twin suns dipped low, painting the sky in gold and violet. As time passed, Ethan stayed on Nuvira, serving as advisor and teacher. He helped raise a generation who valued both strength and mercy. He was no longer the lonely student from Earth, but part of something greater, a bridge between species, between past and future. When he grew older and his steps became slow, the people built a monument in the Academy's courtyard. It showed a simple figure, a human standing with open hands and a small smile. At the base, the words were carved in both languages. He came as a student. He stayed as a friend. He left as family. Years later, when the Queen's children were grown, they continued his teachings. They visited Earth and met the people whose blood and spirit had inspired their mother's faith. They carried with them the ideals Ethan lived by. That courage was not born of power, but of care for others. When Ethan finally passed away, the entire world of Nuvira fell silent. Bells rang from every tower and lights filled the skies for 7 nights. In the palace garden, Lorena stood alone beside his resting place under the same tree where they had once spoken. She placed her hand on the stone and whispered, "You never left, Ethan. You live in every heart that refuses to quit." She looked toward the horizon where dawn began to rise. The first light touched the city's towers, and somewhere, she thought she could almost hear his voice again. Calm, steady, and full of quiet pride. "We don't leave anyone behind." Tears glimmered in her eyes, but she smiled. "No," she whispered back, "you never did." Years turned into centuries. The story of the human student who saved a princess became a legend told across the stars. In every world that remembered Nuvira's victory, children grew up believing that bravery could come from anywhere, even from a small blue world far away. And on quiet nights, when the twin moons rose high, the people said you could still see 2 figures walking side by side among the glowing trees, a queen and the human who changed her world forever. The wind carried their laughter through the leaves, soft and endless, reminding all who heard it that love, courage, and hope are the gifts that never fade.